Alright, hello. Just as a heads up, I am sick, so my voice will sometimes turn into a frog and I might have a coughing attack. So, yeah. So this week we're talking about the reproductive systems for male and female. I'm going to start off by just going over the vocab, and then I preemptively wrote a list of the order of what I want to do things in. It's a little out of order in the beginning, and then towards the end it's just in order. So let's start with our vocab on my little sheet of paper here with very, very tiny writing. So the first word we have, should I practice more with saying these words? Allantoic, which is the lining of the tissue lining of tissue that is created around the amnion. And the amnion is the layer of tissue that's immediately around the fetus, and it makes the amniotic sac. But this allantoic lining is around the amnion, and it creates the allantoic sac and holds fetal urine and water waste. And then around that sac, the allantoic sac, is the chorion, and it's the outermost lining of tissue that surrounds like the fetus. So it surrounds like the other two sacs. And all of this is just for like protection and for the baby, so it's not just in the uterus, because if it was just in the uterus, if like the mom got tousled around, like that wouldn't be good for baby. What's next? So capacitation, it's the changes that a spermatozoa undergoes when it's in the female reproductive tract, enabling them to penetrate and fertilize an ovum. Colostrum is the first milk that's produced by the female, or it's also called pre-milk. And it's a concentrated form of milk that has a lot of protein and antibodies for the new neonates or newborns. And it's very important for the new babies to get, because they don't have any, immunity to anything yet. So it's very crucial that they get that in the first few hours of their life. Copulation is the act of breeding or mating. Corpus luteum is the follicle that bursts to let an ovum out during ovulation. It fills with blood and then thickens and becomes the corpus luteum. And it provides a little bit of estrogen, but is mainly there to provide progesterone, because in the act of releasing an ovum, the body is hoping that there will be a pregnancy, and progesterone wants to maintain pregnancy. That's a vocab from later, so I can just skip that over later. And then cryptorchid is testicles that have failed to descend from the abdominal region. And they have to be extracted, or it could cause testicular cancer. Estrogen is a hormone. In males, it's used to protect and mature sperm. And then in females, it's in higher doses. It's like way higher than in males. And it gives females secondary female characteristics, and also develop follicles in the ovary to prepare for ovulation. Fertilization is the fusion of the DNA from the ovum and the DNA from the sperm to, make a fertilized baby. Implantation is the process of the new blastocyst, which a blastocyst is just, we had our little like zygote of our ovum and sperm meeting, and it's divided multiple times and is now like forming some specialized cells, and it embeds itself into the endometrial lining of the uterus, which is the innermost lining. Actually, kind of dissolves away a little bit and makes a pit. Induced ovulator. Induced ovulators, some examples are like cats, rabbits, and alpacas. They ovulation occurs only when they have been stimulated by like an outside force, like sex. Which is why female cats their kittens can have multiple fathers. Involution is once the mother has given birth, the uterus kind of turns in on itself and like clamps down, and it's to stop like active bleeding from where the placentas were attached to the uterus, because that area is bleeding at that point, and you don't want to bleed out because then who's going to take care of baby. So it also squeezes out any like discarded or like loose endometrial lining and other uterine contents. Lactation, there we go. Wait, no, it went back. Lactation is the secretion of milk from mammary glands, and it's how the offspring gets their nourishment in their first few, weeks, months of life. Um, so there are polyestrous animals, which means that they can have, multiple estresses a year, or if they're like polyester, like seasonal polyesters, then they have like multiple estresses in a season. Monoestrus is an animal that comes into heat only like one time, either per season. No, well, I don't know if I think it's per season and also like maybe per year. I feel like the one veterinary med book said season, but then when you look at other places, it's like per year. So I guess you have to like differentiate. Oocyte is a cell that at this point it's diploid, and it can undergo meiotic division, which would form the haploid cells or the ovum. And then ovum are the mature female reproductive cells that could potentially give rise to an embryo if it was fertilized by sperm. Oxytocin is a very important hormone. It was talked about a lot in the lecture. It causes contractions in the myometrium during labor, and passing the placenta, and it also contracts the smooth muscles around the alveoli of the mammary glands during lactation to squeeze out or ejaculate milk. The placenta is this, or the big bloody organ that it like cushions the fetus. It is a place where maternal and fetal blood supply and nutrients are exchanged. The blood never mixes though. It's just there's a space because of the placenta where the baby can exfoliate waste and mama can give like the baby the nutrients it needs. Oh, I skipped over ovulation. Ovulation occurs in estrus and is when the eggs are released from the ovaries by the bursting follicles. Placentation is the formation of the placenta, and the formation of the placenta occurs because the blastocyst, or at some point, the fetus gets too large for the endometrium to support it by itself. So the placenta forms as support for the growing fetus. Progesterone is a hormone that maintains pregnancy, like I said earlier. Prolactin is a hormone that induces milk production, or keeps milk production. And urachus is a tube that extends from the cranial tip of the fetal bladder to the umbilicus draining fetal water waste from bladder to aleatoric sac. Sorry, I wrote really sloppy there at the end. Alright, so that's all of the vocab. So next, we can talk about just reproduction in general. So, excuse me. Why is the reproduction system unique compared to other systems in the body, and explain the ultimate purpose for the reproductive system? Well, the reproductive system exists so that we can produce more of a species. Cows can produce more cows, dogs can produce more dogs, humans can produce more humans. So it's, you're producing offspring basically to ensure the survival of your species. You want your species to do well. It's unique in the fact that it requires two animals of different sexes to merge together in order to create new life, and also it's the one system that can be entirely taken out without there being any medical consequences to the animal. Like, obviously there's some changes, like, they're less likely to get cancer, but they won't have those secondary male or female characteristics necessarily, but they will go on living normal, happy, healthy lives and might actually live longer because, the cancer part. So let's see. I'm going to pause real quick and make sure I got everything right for point 2. So 1 second. Alright, so I think what I'll do is I'll talk about the pieces and parts of the male reproductive system, and then I'll show the pictures pointing out what I just talked about, so that I'm not just like, oh, here's this and blah, 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 here's this, blah, blah, blah. So what is commonly known, is that obviously, they have penis and testicles, but there's more to that. So they have the scrotal sac that contains the testicles for protection. And is there something else about the scrotal sac? Can't remember. Probably should have looked at that before. I think it's just for protection and just so that they're not flopping around everywhere. The testicles themselves are what houses the oh man, what's the word? Seminiferous tubules? Is that the word? Yeah, seminiferous tubules. Sorry. And that is where your sperm is made, and then around on the top or dorsal and I don't what would it be? I don't know if it'd be caudal or cranial, but it just kind of cups the testicle is the epididymis, and the epididymis is where the sperm is then transported to for maturation and then storage. So the maturation happens in the head and body, and then storage kind of happens in, I think, part of the body and the tail. And then the tail eventually turns into what's known as either the vas ductus or the vas deferens. I like saying vas deferens. That's just my preference. Which eventually meets up with and becomes a part of the spermatic cord. And the spermatic cord links the testes to the rest of the body. It has blood vessels and nerves and lymphatic vessels and the vas deferens. So there's this thing called the seminal vesicles. All animals have it except for dogs and cats. All males have a prostate gland, which I believe it helps with the making. Yes, it helps makes the fluid for the semen. And then let's see. Another gland that dogs will have that every other males have is the bulbourethral gland. It's just another accessory sex gland. And then there's the urethra, and this has two functions. One is that, excuse me, and this is kind of getting into number 3. One has the function of, ejaculating the semen, for the male sex organs that we're talking about. But it also plays a function in, excreting urine from the body. So So the urinary tract system and the reproductive system, they like share the urethra and penis, but for different reasons. And then the penis, there's the root which attaches to the body, like the body of the animal. Then there's the body of the penis, that's the largest part, and then the glands, which is the tip. And then there's the prepuce that sheaths this. It's like a sheath of skin that protects the penis, and um, it's like a wet mucousy environment because the penis doesn't want to be dried out. So when it's not erect, it's just for protection. Let's see. Did I talk about? Oh, I should probably show pictures now. Where is my? So I drew the dog's penis. So where am I at? Okay, so here's the testes, and around them would be like the scrotal sac. Well, I gotta change positions. Ugh. And then we got our penis. On a dog, they don't have a lot of the other things, but they have their own little thing called the oh man, I forgot the name. Oh my god. Ugh, it's like glandus something. Bulbus glandus. Okay, so I got part of it right. Which just makes the tie in male, in canine reproduction. So there's the urethra, and this is the bladder, and so you can see that somewhere along the way the bladder and the urethra connect, but the urethra and the prostate eventually connect, and from the prostate you can like come down the spermatocord and then to the vas deferens, and around here would be like the epididymis, and yeah. Did you want to see it too? Were you seeing what I was talking about? Yes, my boyfriend's the person I'm talking to today. The bowls are a little different. I didn't have time to draw it, so I just pulled up the picture. You can see more of the stuff going on. Yeah, it's better drawn and it's colored. But, so it's pretty different. But, yeah, and you can see better here about how the urinary tract and what words am I trying to say? The urinary tract and the like spermatocord and all link up. Oh, and here you can see that they have the seminal vesicles, right? Oops, hold on. Where's my finger? Right there. And what was the other thing that they should have? Don't know. Well, actually, I kind of do know, but it's not on here. I don't know. Anyways, but yeah, so it has most of the same stuff, but it's different, like placement and structures and all that jazz. So now let's get into the female stuff, female organs. They're a little bit more straightforward because most females are the same. So I have two different pictures. Let me get both of them up. Two different views. So this is kind of like the full like stuff going on here. There's that full stuff going on, and then I have this one where it's more of like a cross section. But let me talk about them first. So we got let's see, we got the uterus, which is where the fetuses develop. Most animals, like especially if they have like litters, they have like a right and left uterine horn. Humans, they just kind of have like a weird but like dogs and cats, like they have like a Y shape, and so they have like the horns and like a body. Part of the uterus is the cervix. It's like a muscular valve that seals off the uterus from the vagina, and is only open 2 times. It will only open to let semen into the uterus, and it will only open to let a fetus pass through it. Then there's the vagina, which is just a hollow tube that extends from the cervix to the vulva, and it is what receives the penis during copulation and is the birth canal during parturition. And it has mucus secreting glands for lubrication purposes, and I believe there's also like ridging for like stimulation to like get the penis to ejaculate. And then the vulva is the only portion of the reproductive tract of the female that is visible from the outside, and is made up of the vestibule, which is kind of like the passageway entrance area, like before the either urethra or the vagina, and the labia, which is like the outside like lip parts, and then the clitoris, which is just kind of inside for like that stimulation. And they too, their like urinary system and reproductive system are really closely linked. So like if you can see here, so this is the bladder, and this is the urethra, and then this is the vestibule, like this passageway, like up here is the vagina, like this, like in humans, like the vagina is like kind of like what's initially first on the inside, but no, it's up here. So they're kind of linked on that way, where they just kind of, this is like the hole that it comes out of. What else to talk about? Oh, there's a few things on here that I missed. Okay, well, one thing that I missed on there is the ovary, which produces ova, eggs, and produces the hormones estrogen, progesterone. You can see it better in this one, because in that one it got cut off for the uterine horn, but this is where the ovaries are. And then another thing that I missed was the infundibulum, which is the catcher's mitt. It catches the ova and puts it into the oviduct, or as we typically refer to them as the fallopian tubes. And so here, like, have our little ovaries, and then we have like our little infundibulum, our oviduct, and then our uterine horn, and then with the uterine body, cervix, vagina, like the vulva, clitoris, and I should probably explain the stuff here. So you got vulva, clitoris, vestibule, vagina, cervix, bladder, urethra, uterine body, and like a little bit part of the uterine horn. Also follicles. So follicles are, oh man, how would I describe it? It's, hold on, hold on. Alright, sorry, I had a brain fire. And a follicle is essentially like the spherical mass of cells that forms a cavity around the ova, and it each are like different stages of like development for the ova. Right now, spermatozoa. So I didn't get into that yet. So the spermatozoa, they have just 3 basic parts to them. They have a head, a midpiece, and a tail. The head is what holds the nucleus, so where the DNA of the male. Excuse me. They also have what's called the acrosome, and it's an enzyme at the tip of the head to dissolve and enter the ova. The midpiece contains a bunch of mitochondria for to produce energy for the locomotion of the sperm. And then the tail is a flagellum, and it is used for locomotion, and it uses the energy from the mitochondria, and it acts kind of like a propeller. sperms should only have one head, and it shouldn't be too big or too small, and it needs to be nice and even and like oval shaped. Can't be like triangular or bumpy, too big or too small. And sperm should only have one straight mid piece, so it shouldn't be all cockeyed and zigzaggy, and there shouldn't be two, and it shouldn't, it should just be nice and straight, and then it should only have one tail. Like, if it had two or three, it's not gonna work right. So, and I'm gonna pause again to regroup myself. Alright, I'm back. Okay, I like this topic a lot, but it's so much that I have to like regroup and okay, this is next. Okay, so next we're talking about the male and female gonads, gametes, ducts, and their accessory glands. Alright, so for the males, their gonads are the testes, because gonads are the glands that produce the gametes, and gametes are haploid cells, which mean I turned southern for a second. Haploid cells are cells that have half of the animal's DNA, so that would be the sperm cells, or spermatozoa. And sorry, I got distracted. So, and as I said before, some ducts would be like the vas deferens, and then or the epididymis and the vas deferens. I guess you could probably say the seminiferous tubules, because they have to travel through those, then they have to travel through the epididymis, and they have to travel through the vas deferens, and then they travel through the spermatoduct, to just get where they need to go. And then after they get to the prostate gland, then they get, ejaculated through the urethra. Some accessory glands would be, all the males have prostate glands, which helps produce that fluid for the semen, because semen is fluid plus sperm. And some other ones, depending on the species, would be the bulbourethral gland and the seminal vessels, which contribute to shut up. I can't talk, okay? You try saying these words. Which contribute to the production of the fluid for semen. And then let's move on to our lovely ladies. Their their gonads are the ovaries, because ovaries produce the gametes of the ova, because ova are haploid. They have half of the female's DNA. So the ducts that they travel through would be the oviduct after they got caught by that infundibulum. Their accessory glands, from what I can tell, would be like their vulva, like with their vestibule and clitoris, and for like stimulation and entrance and stuff like that. So next I want to talk about the follicle stimulating hormone and the luteinizing hormone, because they basically happen in the same way in males and females. What is different is what they're targeting, because male and females have different have different gonads, have different reproductive organs. So if we just focus on the male real quick, so in both, the hypothalamus tells the anterior pituitary through gonadotropin releasing hormone, or GnRH, which is much easier to say. It tells it through that hormone to tell the anterior pituitary to release luteinizing hormone, or LH, or follicle stimulating hormone, which is FSH. So that happens in both male and females. The hypothalamus produces the hormone GnRH, goes to the anterior pituitary, releases LH and FSH. Now in males, what specifically happens is that the LH targets the Leydig cells, and the Leydig cells are oh no, crap! What are the Leydig cells? I'm gonna pause. Hold on. All right, so the Leydig cells are the interstitial cells of the testes. Because this is both of LH and FSH are both going to our gonads in both cases. So, but we're talking about the testes. So the Leydig cells are interstitial cells. And then the FSH is targeting the nerve cells to facilitate spermatogenesis. The LH stimulating the Leydig cells, interstitial cells, it causes the production of testosterone. And testosterone is then what's the word? Targeted by, or targets the nerve cells, which helps further with this spermatogenesis. At the same time, though, there is a negative feedback loop that the testosterone goes to the anterior and pituitary and hypothalamus, and it tells them, oh, hey, we have enough testosterone. So it's kind of like a loop of like balance and stuff. Yeah, so because that's like a overview, and then like if you go like a little bit specific, like LH affects the testes, it tells the Leydig cells to make testosterone, like I was saying, and then testosterone is used for sperm development, so that's why it targets back to those nerve cells, and it gives male secondary characteristics, so that's where you see like the muscles and the deep voices and the defining like skeletal markers. And the FSH, which is also affecting the testes, tells the cells to make some estrogen. They don't have a lot of estrogen. It's a little bit to be used to protect and mature the sperm, but a lot of the testosterone that is made from the LH effect is used for that spermatogenesis. So is that okay? So then for the ovaries, it's similar but different. So after the gonadotropin hormone releasing hormone, gonadotropin releasing hormone tells the pituitary to release FSH and LH. They affect the ovaries. So the FSH affects the ovaries by telling the ovaries to produce estrogen, and by doing that, it gives the female secondary characteristics like mammary glands, and maybe like a more prominent vulva, and is needed for the development of follicles in the ovary. LH affects the ovaries by telling the ovaries to produce progesterone, and that's needed to establish it and maintain a pregnancy. And then the same sort of similar thing happens is like after this estrogen and this progesterone is released, there's like this feedback loop that goes back to the anterior and hypothalamus to tell them, hey, we don't need as much production anymore, we have enough. I'm gonna pause and regather myself. Okay, so next is the 5 main functions of the male reproductive system. Function 1 is produce sperm on a constant basis, so males can constantly have their seminiferous tubules producing sperm. Um, the cells that like help nourish the developing sperm are called the nurse cells, or the Sertoli or sustenacular cells. They actually help form a blood-testes barrier, and this is important because once you make a haploid cell, once you make that sperm cell, or like that baby sperm cell, the white blood cells in your body will they will perceive that as a foreign object and will attack and kill the sperm, and that's not good if you want to pass on your genes to the next generation. Keep the species going. That's the whole point of reproduction, is the survival of your species. The nurse cells also have a phagocytic function and have binding sites for testosterone, to help with that production of the sperm. So the second function is the storage of sperm and, allowing it to mature, and that would be in the epididymis. I think I've said that a few times. The epididymis contains cilia and smooth muscle to keep the sperm moving throughout the ductus vas deferens. Number 3 is produce testosterone. I just went into how that all happens with GnRH and LH and FSH. Function number 4 is to transport the sperm to the female reproductive tract, and this is the process of moving the sperm from the seminiferous tubules to the epididymis, where it's stored and matured, then travels through the vas deferens to the urethra, and through the pelvic, the prostate gland, and then is ejaculated through the urethra, through the penis into the female's vagina. Number 5, the last function, is provides and secretes fluids to assist in the delivery of sperm to the female reproductive tract. And this is important because without the seminal fluid, without that component of the semen, the sperm would have nothing to swim through, so they would not be able to go anywhere once they got into the female's vagina. The semen, the fluid, has some fructose in it, so it helps keep your mitochondria sustained, like it gives them energy to give the tails energy. Increases the volume of semen, just to give some more oomph, and it's alkaline, so it's more like basic, so that it helps neutralize the acidic environment of the female's reproductive tract, because if you didn't have that, then the sperm would be destroyed by the acidity of the female reproductive tract. So spermatogenesis, I was kind of describing it, so it's helped. This happens in the seminiferous tubules of the testes. They have these nurse cells that help nourish them, and are what can that testosterone can be binded to like help with that too. I think I said all that about it basically. I described the route of the sperm migration from the site of formation to the ejaculation. I just did that. define and compare sperm, spermatozoa, and semen. So I think I just said that too. Sperm and spermatozoa is the gamete. It's the haploid cell. It's what has the male's DNA. The semen is the sperm, the spermatozoa plus fluid, so thus makes semen. And I listed off the advantages of the semen just a little bit ago. So yeah, okay, we're moving along nicely. So next, we're going to talk about the descent of the testes. So before or shortly after birth, the testes should have made their way from the abdominal region by your kidneys down through what's known as the inguinal rings of like your abdomen. So it's like passing through like the muscle of your abdomen and should be out of the body. So let's see. Let's see. So oh, the one thing I missed about the purpose of the scrotum earlier was it helps regulate the body temperature. Because this is what your testes descend into once they do leave your abdominal region and, you know, pass through the inguinal ring. The reason why that the testes descend is that your body cannot produce sperm at the temperature that it would like, because it needs a lower temperature than what you would provide if it was like within you. So it needs a little bit of a cooler body temperature. Well, it needs a little bit cooler than body temperature. There is excuse me. There's 3 main mechanisms for the temperature regulation. And again, this is important because we want to continue the species, and if we don't, if our testicles are if the male's testicles are within the body, then they can't produce the sperm because it's not ideal, and then the male will become infertile most likely because it's too hot for this, for spermatogenesis to take place. So these mechanisms that help with this are the dartos muscle, and this is a thin layer of smooth muscle that's directly adhered to the skin of the scrotum, so it's like on the outside. So we have scrotum, and then we have the dartos muscle. Excuse me. And so if it gets too cold, what this muscle will do is it'll contract the scrotal sac, and it'll get smaller. So yep, that's the outside layer. Oh, and I have a little picture. It's not the best picture, but I can show you afterwards after I'm done. Next we have what's called the cremaster muscle. It's strips of the abdominal muscle that pass through the inguinal ring along with the testes, like the testes kind of pushed them out with it. It is like the next layer. So we have the scrotal sac, we have the dartos muscle, and then we have the cremaster muscle. It's around the testicle and part of the spermatocord, partially due to that it going with it along its path. If it's too cold, the same thing as the dartos muscle, it will contract and pull the testes toward the body. But it also has the capability of, if it's too hot and you still want to try to maintain this, spermatogenesis, so the body will actually relax and drop the testicles away from the body, trying to hopefully that means that it will get at a lower temp if it's farther away from your body. And then lastly, we have the pampiniform plexus. I don't know how to say that word, sorry. Should have practiced that. Pampiniform plexus. Piniform. Pampiniform. Sorry. But this is a network of tiny veins from the testicular vein. Network of tiny veins that surround an artery. So there's basically more veins around the testicles than arteries, because arteries, they're, exchanging this new oxygenated blood from within your body, and it's pretty hot. And so there's a lot of veins around your arteries in the testicles to kind of diffuse and disperse that heat, so it's not so drastic on the testicles, and so that we can still have the spermatogenesis. If we don't have the descending testes, this is called the cryptorchidism, and it could happen to one of both. The size of the testes will actually decrease because it's not getting that production of testosterone and sperm to it because it's too hot. And if it's not removed, then you're 3 times more likely to have testicular cancer in that animal. So let's see. Should have said this one first, but the other one came before this one, so I guess I'll just have to work this in. So we know the mechanisms for how they control the temperature regulation, but we didn't really talk about what exactly happens as they descend. So as the testes descend, they push some of the I know how to say this right. Peritoneum ahead of them. So I think I kind of alluded to this earlier with that cremaster muscle being stripped, so the abdominal muscle basically. So one of the layers is the tunica albuginea, or albuginae, and it's basically this capsule that encloses each testicle. So each testicle has their own little thing. And this is made out of heavy fibrous connective tissue, and it protects and supports the testes and keeps the semifemoris tubules in the testicles. Next, we have the tunica vaginalis, or the vaginal tunic. It has a visceral layer, which is thin and transparent, and it directly adheres to the testicles. And then we have the parietal layer, which is the outer layer and encases the testes and the spermatocord. So I think in my little picture, do I have those listed out? Oh man, it's gonna be really hard, but I'm gonna try to explain it. So, because it's not the best picture. So the darkest circle that we have there, that's the testes. And directly surrounding that, we have the tunic vaginalis. Sorry, I can't angle this right. Right there. And then around that, we have I believe it's the cremaster muscle. And then we have our tunica dartus muscle and the scrotal skin. We have our our little epididymis around our testes that comes up into the vas deferens, and then around the vas deferens, and I didn't want to get too into the testicles because I know it got really, sorry, I'm not even showing you, then it got really sloppy. But we have our plexus piniform plexus. So yeah. Oh, and then for castration, so open castration is done in small animals like dogs and cats. You cut open the vaginal tunic, and so you can isolate the vas deferens and the blood vessels. And then in closed castration, you don't open up the vaginal tunic, and it's often done in large animals with just like some clamps. Right now I'm going to pause again and regroup. Alright, so next we have the 5 main functions of the female reproductive system. So the first function is to produce ova through oogenesis in a cyclic manner. There's 2 types of cycles. We have the menstrual cycle, like what us humans have, and then the estrous cycle, which most other animals have besides like primates and a few other select animals. Next function is hormonal control in the female. So this is what I was talking about earlier with the FSH and LH and the gonadotropin releasing hormone, all that jazz. Number 3 function is oogenesis itself and ovulation. This is where the follicle grows from stimulation of the FSH, and eventually the ova will rupture from the follicle once it's reached its max size, and that's the actual occurrence of ovulation. And ovulation happens during the estrous stage of the estrous cycle. And the difference between estrus with a US and estrus with a OUS is, so like the menstrual cycle is named for the part of our cycle, which is menses, which is menstruation. So menstrual cycle is named after the part of this cycle. So it's the same thing applies for the estrous cycle. Estrus is named for the part called estrus of the cycle where the animal is in heat and is receptive to breeding. And so that's the difference with that. The 4th function is provides a physical environment for the replication of the offspring. So that's like the uterus and providing the nourishment and blood and taking out the waste for the fetus. And then lastly, we have manufactures and secretes milk for the growth and development of the offspring, after parturition. So let's talk about define oogenesis and discuss the process of the oocyte formation and ovulation. And can I not move this now? Okay. And include relevant anatomy, including what changes are occurring within the ovary. Okay, so. Alright, so basically what's happening in oogenesis. So it's kind of like spermatogenesis. It's producing sperm. In oogenesis, we're producing an oocyte or an ovum. Or wait, do I have that backwards? Hold on. Sorry. We have an oocyte. Wait, no, okay. Because right here it says an oogonium becomes a secondary oocyte, but I think oogonium and oocyte are synonymous, and a secondary oocyte is an ovum. I think that's what's saying, because it's saying that the secondary oocyte through many meiotic divisions. So basically, we have a diploid oogonium oocyte that undergoes meiotic division to become the secondary cell, this haploid cell, this ova, to hopefully become fertilized. But within, oogenesis and ovulation, there's this follicle that contains the ova, and this follicle grows due to an increase in FSH from our anterior pituitary gland. Um, what else? Hold on. Sorry. So ovulation occurs, I think I said this, when the follicle reaches its max size because, it's getting bathed in this FSH and it's producing more and more estrogen. It's getting bigger. The cells secrete this fluid into the space called the antrum, and it's swelling, and then it gets bigger and it ruptures due to a rise in some LH. And this is when ovulation occurs. It's when this LH rises, and it's when the ova is released from the follicle. And it's at this point that the female is ready for breeding. And like before this, I believe it's like in the ovary. There's a lot of different follicles at like different stages of development, and whichever one is like the most ready is what's released, and left behind is the corpus luteum, and that's basically the follicle getting filled with blood and thickening tissue, and it just kind of looks like a lump on the ovary. So that's like a physical change that you can see with it. And this follicle is producing progesterone it's basically getting the uterus ready for the possibility of a pregnancy and trying to maintain it. So next we have describe each stage of the estrous cycle. So that would be OUS. So let's start with it at anestrus. So anestrus is the part of the estrous cycle where there's no activity whatsoever. Okay, I need to blow my nose. Let me pause. Hold on. Pause. Alright, so like I was saying, anestrus is when there's no activity going on in any stop in any organ, or man, I'm not good with words today, or maybe any day. But so like there's no behavioral signs, there's no like real hormone secretion, ovaries and uterus are inactive, things are just normal, cervix is closed, the vagina is normal, and there's just no external physical signs. Then we get into proestrus, which means before estrus. So in this stage, the female is not necessarily, she's not permitting mounting, but she's kind of like flirting with the male, and the male is getting attracted to her, but she still won't permit mounting. Hormones that are being released at this time are FSH and estrogen. It's getting, the eggs, stirred up. It's, because estrogen and the follicle stimulating hormone is what's, follicle stimulating hormone is telling the ovaries to release estrogen, and estrogen is what's getting these follicles ready. The uterus is starting to increase blood supply to the endometrial lining, and it's starting to thicken. The cervix is starting to open a little bit, but it's not open yet. Like, it starts getting ready, basically. The vagina is swelling, and because of this swelling, the vulva is also swollen, and bright red stringy mucus can discharge because it's so swollen that like the vessels are kind of like bursting a bit. So this isn't the period, what a lot of people think when they see their dogs or cats or whatever leaking blood. But they don't menstruate like us, they have estrus. So then after proestrus, we finally get into estrus. um so the behavioral signs of this would be sexually receptive. The female will let the male mount. um the estrogen and FSH are decreasing now because the follicle has been released or is about to be released depending on the species, and LH is now increasing because this is what's going to tell progesterone to start kicking into gear, but progesterone is not available yet. The ovary, the follicles are ready to ovulate, or they have ovulated depending on the animal. The cervix is now open. It's ready to receive any semen that the male will provide. The vagina is returning to normal size. Some external signs is the vulva is decreasing in size, and there's a dramatic reduction of vaginal discharge, and the mucus, there's some mucus discharge that's present. So basically estrus is heat, so it's like when like cows are being restless or bellowing and mounting others, horses and cats and dogs are like flagging with their tails and like moving them out of the way. Horses, they squat and urinate. Dogs allow the male to get closer and sniff and mount, obviously. Cats are very annoying. They yell, they roll around, they crouch, put their butt in the air and try to trip you and shit. Oh, sorry. And for cows, typically, like, estrus can last just 12 to 18 hours, while for like a dog, it's like 9 to 10 days. So knowing the length of time for your animal's like estrus is critical if you're trying to breed the animal. So like farmers, they're like constantly checking on their cows, seeing when they're showing signs of like proestrus and then estrus, so that they know when to breed that cow, especially like dairy cows for like milk and beef production. And then if you're just breeding dogs because you want to breed dogs for money type stuff, but so it's important to know the differences in estrus between your different species depending on what you're looking for. Let's see. So diestrus occurs after estrus is over. Behavioral signs: the female will not let the male mount her anymore. She's no longer sexually receptive. Progesterone is now the predominant hormone because it is around maybe potentially supporting a pregnancy or getting ready to support a pregnancy. The ovary now has a corpus luteum on it, or multiple depending on how, if it's a dog that has like 5 puppies or 5 eggs that it released, there's gonna be 5 corpus luteum. If it's a horse with 1, then there's just 1. The uterus, the blood supply's thickness is established. If no pregnancy results, then the lining will be reabsorbed with no external signs. If pregnancy does occur, the uterus is ready to support the embryo, and this is thanks to all of this building up with the lining and now the progesterone like establishing it more. The cervix is now closed and nothing can come in or out. The vagina and external physical signs, there's nothing. It's fine. It's normal. So if there's no pregnancy that occurs, the corpus luteum will like dissolve or just go away within 6 to 7 days. But if there is a pregnancy, then it lasts throughout the whole pregnancy. Let's see. So now we're going to get into gestation. And gestation is basically the pregnancy. So this is if you successfully have bred your dog, cat, cow, horse, pig. And gestation is just basically the pregnancy. It's the carrying of the fetus. And there's 3 stages to a pregnancy. You might be familiar with them. They're the trimesters. There's first, second, and third. In the first trimester, it composes of fertilization, implantation, and placentation. So fertilization is the egg and sperm meeting up and combining as one, becoming a zygote. The sperm has to penetrate 2 layers around the egg before it can be successful, and those are the corona radialis and the zona pellucida. Implantation is the blastocyst embedding itself into the endometrium lining of the uterus. And the nutrients are obtained from the maternal blood supply through diffusion. There's no mixing of the blood, because if there was, then the mom's body would be like, hey, this is a foreign thing, let's attack it. Placentation is the formation of a placenta, and this happens because the endometrial lining cannot support the growth of the fetus after a certain period of time, and so the placenta is formed for that purpose. And again, like, even once the placenta is made and there's like vessels for each part of, there's the maternal vessels and the fetal vessels. There's no absolute mixing of blood at any part. There's just diffusion, basically. Like, there's a space where, like, let's say this is the maternal mother's stuff and this is like the fetus. Like, they're in this space together. They don't touch, they don't intermingle. Like, her nutrients filter into the space, and then the fetus can pick it up, and then the fetus can expel its waste, and the mother can pick it up and dispose of it. In the second trimester, this is where most of your fetal development happens with all the bodies, organs, and tissues and systems, and it develops to completeness. Let's see what else. Something interesting is that since fetuses don't have to breathe with their lungs, that whole part is bypassed. So the O2 is delivered through the maternal blood supply, so it bypasses the lungs. The nutrients are delivered through the maternal blood, so that also means that they can bypass the GI tract. There's still blood going to these organs, but not like in the same manner it would for, like, an animal that's outside of the womb. And then the third trimester is last. This is where mom starts getting ready. She starts getting heavier mammary glands, and that's because of some hormonal changes: estrogen from the placenta, progesterone from the corpus luteum, and prolactin has started to become more prevalent, the hormone for producing milk. And this hormone starts to become more prevalent towards the end of the third trimester, like towards parturition. So parturition is usually shown that, it's coming from like restlessness, nesting, abdominal enlargement, isolation, milk production, or waxing. And parturition is, the act of giving birth. It's initiated by several factors. It's, size and weight of the fetal mass and uterus, hormonal changes, estrogen and relaxin are starting to increase. That softens the pubic symphysis and opens and relaxes the cervix. Progesterone starts to decrease, and that causes some mild contractions to occur. The fetus actually starts releasing cortisol from the adrenal glands, and this results in a uterine secretion of prostaglandins. and the prostaglandin PGF2A to be more specific. And this actually lyses that corpus luteum, and that was what was, keeping this pregnancy, because it's progesterone, it's for gestation, it's for the pregnancy. But once it gets lysed and there's no more progesterone, that's really when, contractions start kicking into high gear. This is when stage 1 of parturition begins, because of that dramatic fall of progesterone. So stage 1 is the dilation of the cervix. So there's some contractions going on because of this, the prostaglandins, and this basically presses the fetus down against the cervix, and this is like when the fetus starts positioning itself. So this push of the fetus against the cervix creates this feedback loop of, like, it's a positive feedback loop of oxytocin. So pushing against the cervix, there's, nerve receptors that are like, hey, this is happening. So the push of the cervix goes through nervous neurons, afferent neurons, to the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is like, hey, posterior pituitary gland, make oxytocin, and then oxytocin goes, it contracts muscle, so it goes to the myometrium, which is the muscle of the uterus, and tells it to contract, and so it contracts, and then that causes the baby to be then pushed against the cervix, and then that pushing tells the cervix, hey, tell the afferent neurons and tell the hypothalamus and tell it to really, and so it's just this constant cycle of oxytocin being released and contracting. And so the strengthening contractions continue to stretch the cervix, and, so on and so forth. So at this point, the mother is getting restless and she's pacing, she's uncomfortable, and she's most likely, her pulse is going up and she's breathing harder. In dogs and cats, when you're trying to, like, figure out when they're going into labor, you can also take their temperature, and their temperature actually drops a degree or two once they start stage 1. In stage 2, this is the expulsion of the fetus. So at this point, like, the fetus is, like, in the opening of the cervix. It's, like, at the cervix. And so there's, like, a lot of oxytocin that's like, okay, let's go. It's because there's a lot of nerve stimulation, and it's responsible for this really strong uterine contractions. And that's why it hurts like the dickens when it's coming through the cervix like that. And so the fetus is moving through the cervix, the pelvic canal, and then the fluid should have passed, and then there's some strong uterine contractions occurring. There's an abdominal straining occurring because, the mother's pushing at this point. And at this point, the dog and cat temperatures return to normal. But then it kind of goes back to stage 2, like the beginning of stage 2 with, like, that temperature drop if, like, you have multiple babies, like with dogs and cats. But let's say all the dogs and cats, they finish with their babies, or, horse one baby, you're done. Stage 3 is where parturition ends by after you deliver the placenta. There's still some oxytocin happening to, have those uterine contractions. They're weaker, but they're still there. You should always, like, if you have multiple babies, you should always count to make sure you have as many placentas as you do babies, because if you don't, then you might have a retained placenta, and that's not good. And now that parturition is done, you're, uterus does that involution thing I described earlier, which is, stopping the bleeding. Let's see. I'm going to pause and see what else I have to talk about. All right, let's try to get through these last 4 points so that you're not sitting here listening to me talk forever and I can do other things. Okay, so next we have, what do you want? We got the guidelines for human intervention during parturition. So basically the rule of thumb is that you should try to let, Mother Nature just do what it has to do. But when you should get involved is when there's a prolonged pregnancy or the animal is overdue. Like, when it was bred, when they should be having the babies and if they're overdue. If the mother is ill or is in distress during pregnancy, then you should help the mother. If you see like bright red blood, like you're bleeding, like, because obviously there's some like redness and goop and some blood, but like not like actual bleeding. Like if it's bright red, like vaginal hemorrhage during labor, then that's serious and you need to get medical intervention. If you see green or black vaginal discharge prior to delivery of the first like puppy or something, then that's not good because that's the placenta starting to detach and deteriorate, and that's not good. If, let's say, the dog rests for 3 or more hours between puppies, or if like the animal, is just like a different animal is just resting too long between 2 babies, then that's when you should maybe intervene. If an animal with multiple litters are delivering stillborns, or if the mother is straining for an hour or continuously before delivering any baby, then that's when you should all intervene. And everything should just be minimal. So so the hormones involved in milk ejaculation and production are oxytocin and prolactin. So there's the suckling from the baby, on the teat, sends a sensory impulse to the hypothalamus, and this stimulates both the production, or it stimulates it to tell both the posterior pituitary gland and the anterior pituitary gland to produce. The posterior pituitary gland produces oxytocin, and this is our contracting hormone. So it causes contraction of the myoepithelial cells surrounding the alveoli of the teat, the breast, and so basically it's milk ejaculation. The anterior pituitary gland produces prolactin, which causes secretion. Oh, excuse me, I'm so sorry. And it's basically milk production. And this just ensues, with more suckling. So milk is different, on different species. And like puppy and kitten milk, for instance, I'm sorry, my throat is not having fun right now. Their milk has a lot more fat and protein in the milk. And so, well, as, compared to a cow, which has low fat and protein. So if you were to find this, puppy on the road that, isn't weaned yet, you can't give it milk from your fridge to it because there's not enough for that puppy. It wouldn't be adequate enough, or, the kitten, and you would probably end up killing the puppy because it's not getting the nutrients and the fat and protein that it needs. And lastly, I mean, I kind of was saying this all along, but I guess I'll just wrap it up in a nice little bow. Just like the various male and female reproductive hormones and the involvement and everything. So, I mean, gonadotropin releasing hormone is what's released by the hypothalamus to tell the pituitary to get things going. LH in males stimulates. I don't remember it, so I gotta look back. Come on. Alright. LH tells the interstitial cells to make testosterone, and the testosterone is used for development and secondary male characteristics. FSH in males tells the nurse cells to create estrogen, which is used for sperm protection and maturation. And then in females, we have all those same hormones, just used differently. The FSH in the ovaries tells them to produce estrogen. The estrogen in the female is giving secondary female characteristics and developing those follicles for the ovary. And then the LH is affecting the ovaries by telling them to produce progesterone, which will maintain pregnancy. And then during parturition, oxytocin is released due to stimuli on the cervix that's getting relayed to the hypothalamus, then to the posterior pituitary gland, and it releases the oxytocin that tells it to contract. And then we have oxytocin being released for a different sensory pathway, which was suckling from the teats that helps with ejaculating milk. And then we have the suckling also stimulating the production of prolactin, which is the milk production. So that was all that I have to say on the reproductive systems of both males and females. I'm sorry that this is very long, but this is a very long topic. I enjoyed the topic a lot, though, and so I hope I did it justice by, explaining it well enough. And I hope you have a great day. All right, bye.